Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Everyone is Addicted. Today's guest, Haley, is here to share her experience and knowledge on addiction, and I'm going to let her take it away. Thank you for coming on and welcome.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I have a bit of a different take, I think. And it's not about me, but I'm going to be talking about the Amish and what addictions they struggle with and how they handle those.
And I thank you for that because I feel like that's an area we don't know about because unless you're Amish, the community's very to themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like I live in an area where there is a large Amish community just outside of here, and they're very much like within their own community, and they don't really share those things with us, right? So it's something that brings to light that they do also suffer the way that we also suffer. So thank you so much for being able to share that with us. I appreciate it.
So if I can give just a little bit of background on how I became acquainted with the Amish. I moved from Portland, Oregon to rural Missouri 10 years ago, and living in Portland, there are no Amish out west that I'm aware of. So I didn't understand the culture. I really didn't know anything about them except for what I saw on TV, or maybe I couldn't get into the romance books. But as a general rule in our society, the Amish are romanticized. They're put on this pedestal, like they live better than everybody else, and they live this idyllic life out in the country, and everybody loves each other, and nothing ever goes wrong, and it's just this perfect life. So when I got to become acquainted with the Amish, I started shopping at their little dry goods stores and hired them to work on our house. And then they asked me to be a taxi driver to them. So the Amish, they drive their horse and buggy, and if they want to go farther than like 10 miles, and trust me, they do all the time, then they will hire a driver who has typically a big van. And that gave me the opportunity to really get an inside look into their world and to learn that the way that the media and those books portray the Amish is not always accurate.
Because like you said, I myself, because I live near them, they have their markets and like they have a market and uh like romanticize them or see them as people who live cleaner, better. Like you said, like I also have that pedestal thought about what their life is like, or at least I haven't so far, right?
Let me shatter that for you. No, I just, yeah, that was right. They're known for their quilts and their baking and their sales and, their chickens and their farm produce. And that's kind of what people think in their large families. And the men and women are not allowed to divorce once they marry. It is for life, and they mean it, and they enforce that no matter what happens, no matter if there's murder or rape or adultery or like any kind of addiction. Sometimes
Even
addictions can tear
adultery.
apart, even adultery or murder. There's in my
Because
community,
my
there's a
friend
murder.
was
Yeah.
married to she was Jehovah Witness and she was married to a man who abused her and she was not allowed to divorce him unless he committed adultery. So she stayed had to stay married to him until he committed adultery. He eventually did, and then she was set free. So that's why I was just wondering, like even with adultery, murder, anything like it, they have to stay married no matter what, eh? Oh
Until
wow.
death. And they mean it. And I didn't know that about the Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, there's been a lot of adultery. So I don't know what people think addictions typically are, but when I think about addiction, like I was just Googling because I was curious what like the top addictions are in America. And we think video games, social media, pornography,
Cell phones.
yeah, the cell phones, nicotine, gambling, food, drugs, shopping was up there. And the little Amish women, they can't hardly shop because they've got their buggies. Where are they going to go?
Mm-hmm.
To the dry goods store? They can't get on Amazon. They can't go to the mall. right? So they can't really become addicted to shopping. The Amish, for those of you that don't know, they typically don't have technology. They won't have a phone or video games or TVs. They just live off the grid, very simple, quiet, natural life. So they don't have those addictions like the video games and the cell phones and the shopping. And I've never heard of an Amish person addicted to drugs or nicotine or gambling. How are they going to gamble, right? They can't go to the casino, they can't get on their phone.
They don't really have like the money either. So if they were to sit there and, like play dice or something like that, what are they gonna like, gamble over chickens maybe? I don't know, or produce. Like I'm not sure, right?
Produce. There have been some memes going around, right? Like have you seen those memes where they're like the chicken eggs, or people are fighting over the price of chicken eggs and they're very valuable because of our shortage. But actually, another myth about the Amish is that they're poor. They might look poor because they wear the same clothes and they drive a horse and buggy and they have very simple homes. But I'm telling you, they are wealthy. They're painfully wealthy.
I I have a
So
friend who left the community, but he learned obviously like they build their own houses, right? He left the Amish community and started his own um business building houses, and because of the knowledge he got from being growing up Amish and stuff like that, he makes extraordinary houses and is very wealthy. So I can see that aspect because he right away, like he made money out of everybody that I went to school with. He's the most successful person I know. So yeah.
yeah, I believe it. Yeah, they stop school at 14 and then they work, and the young men make a man's wage. And so they're working for, I don't know, around in Missouri, $25 an hour, right? From the time they're 14. So yeah, and they
That's
just have
yeah, that's good
less
money at
expenses.
14.
I know it's good money at 40. Just for Missouri, where we live, it's not bad. But well, and I think that there are other addictions. Like I think that some people can become addicted to work, or I've seen some Amish, especially of the lower order, like the Schwarzentrooper Amish, become addicted to seeing how hard they can make life, because in their culture, they are taught that life has to be hard, and the more you struggle, the more humble you are, and that is what is required to get back to God. And it's through our works, not through God's grace, that they get back to God. So those are some of the unique addictions. They also, some Amish, and I could talk a lot on this, are very hypersexual. So in Amish land,
Okay, yeah, that could be one with them.
okay, that's one that we can really talk about. But in Amish land, something that I learned is that, because I remember I was driving this woman, I'm trying to make up a name. I'll call her Martha. Okay. Her real name is not Martha. But I remember we were driving back from Wisconsin and she needed to come sit in the front seat of the van with me. And I thought she was car sick. And so I'm like, I'm so sorry. Do you want some peppermint? Should we open the windows, turn on the air conditioning? What can I do to help you manage this car sickness so we can make it home? And she's like, oh, that's not it. And then she leaned close to me and she whispered in my ear, and I'm driving and I'm leaning over to her and she's like, I'm pregnant. And I'm like, why why are you whispering that to me? Like, what? And then I kind of whispered back, like, does your husband know? And she laughed at me and she's like, yes, my husband know. I'm like, then why are you whispering this to me? And she's like, well, because in our culture, we don't talk about it. Like my kids don't know, people in the community don't know, just my husband and parents know.
Hmm.
Nobody else knows. And I'm like, what? I've never heard that. And they have these dresses that they wear and they just hide their pregnancy. So sexuality is something that is absolutely not talked about. Like, I don't think you know how babies are made until like you're making one, right? Or you're
Yeah, but
just
they get
before
married pretty
you're
young
married.
too.
18 to 20 is very common. Yeah, that is young, but I couldn't believe it. And so when they have a baby, then they tell their children, like, look what God gave me. Right? The children get whisked away. They have their
Oh.
baby at home. The child comes back, and all of a sudden there's this mom and this baby, and they never saw her stomach growing or knew anything. So So they're just so afraid of sexuality. I mean, hyper afraid. So they don't talk about it. And so it leads to a lot of problems within their communities. I mean, endless problems. If you look in the media, you can Google, like there was a case in Seymour, Missouri, which is also Swartz and Truber Amish. So they're the lowest of the low order. Like they have no technology, nothing, you know. There were two brothers that kept raping their sister. And she was like 12. You can Google this. And she got pregnant. Oh, what happened?
Can you
Can you?
turn your speaker up just a smidge?
Yes. Let me see. Okay. Is that better?
No. I wonder if
Okay.
it's my
It's going
end.
now. It must, yeah, I'm turning it up on my end. It's going up. Yep. Yeah, I'm good on my end.
It's okay. I can still hear you. I'm just gonna, yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I can talk slower. So
No,
these
no, no.
two,
It's totally fine. It's just a little bit quiet. It's no big deal. Don't worry about it. Okay, just forget I said it.
okay, no. Okay, so these two boys were raping their sister Silly, and she had a baby, and they don't know which son it was. And then what they did with the baby was they gave it to the mom, this 12-year-old girl's
Mm-hmm.
mom, to raise, and they just made up a story around it. But that's one of the problems that they have because they just don't talk about sexuality. And this girl did not know what was going on with her, right? And they're not taught appropriate ways to deal with it. They're not taught what it is, how sacred and special it is, and how it is to be managed. There are appropriate ways and times. And do you get my drift?
Yeah.
Like, like that's hypersexuality is a real issue. And then the other thing that I have seen is actually I did mention pornography and how would the Amish access it, right? Like I have three boys, okay? I have three girls too, but I have three boys and I've caught them all looking at, stuff on the computer, right? Or on the phone or
Mm-hmm.
on the tablet and we teach them that that's a bad thing, but it's so easily accessible. And I have driven I've driven around with the Amish guys. I've driven their work crews to go build houses or put on roofs and I have conversations with them and one guy, we'll call him Levi. He's like, yeah, I saw this because the driver showed me this inappropriate stuff on his phone. So
And they're
there's
not
that
supposed
in
to
it.
have phones, are they?
No, but the drivers can have phones.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so there's this driver in our area and he he has shown the Amish men things that the Amish men would not
I
see
get it.
otherwise.
They see it from us. Okay.
They have
Yeah.
seen it from us on their phone. And then there was one family, they have since recently moved to Montana, but this man, he's got a few kids, young man, ran a very successful construction crew when he was here in Missouri. But they had told me he was addicted to pornography. And what happened was he had seen it on the cell phone, like of his drivers, the male drivers. I do not, I don't show them, like I try to respect their beliefs and just keep things away from them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But some of the male drivers don't. They get off on showing these Amish men who have only seen their wives, right? And who their wives look very different than you and I do, right? Because they're wearing their
Yeah.
dresses. They're not allowed to shave anything anywhere. Okay. They're whites. They don't get in the sun. They're just different, and
Yeah.
then they're seeing all these sexy women or whatever.
Well, if you've only ever seen one woman your whole
Right.
life, to see
Yeah.
another one would definitely be different, like a different experience, right? So that I can see how that could be addicting because then you're like, oh, wow, look at this whole new world of women and sexuality that I've never even heard of, almost, right?
Yeah. Well, I have driven the cruise. I remember I was in another community not too far from here, and the men were it's just sitting out there at a little hamburger joint having a hamburger, and I'm in the van, crocheting away. And there are a couple of women, and they walk by, and they're in leggings, just leggings, right? And they're dressed about like I am, shirt and leggings. And they turned their heads so fast, their heads about fell off their necks. They're like, "Whoa!" It's just because it's so foreign to them, right?
Well, that's like when you go to the markets. I try to respect them by like dressing a little bit more like covered up, like sweatshirt or something like that. But I notice that when they're in the markets, if there's like a woman wearing like a tank top or something, that they're definitely like, you know, when she walks by or something like that, right? Or even when they're in the buggies driving by and they see like, cause there's an AA meeting right outside of the markets, so they'll be going by on their buggies as we'll be leaving or something like that, and you'll see their heads turn. So I can see what you mean by like they're just not they don't experience it very much in their culture. So when they see something, it's so much more alluring to them than it would be to us, right?
Right. It's, yeah, that's perfect example. That's everyday life to us, and they're not allowed to talk about it, right? And their
Mm,
wives are not allowed to. I mean, they're not allowed to shave. Like I said, they're not allowed to wear makeup. They always keep their head covered. It's a different kind of beauty, and they're used to, the kind that you and I
mm-hmm.
experience is new to them, and it's very fascinating to them. And the women are also taught, I don't remember what this thing is called, and I need to get I do have one. But anyway, I call it a boob blocker because the women wear their dresses that go down to their calves and, cover up to their elbows. And then they have this triangle shaped thing that they tuck into their apron that they wear around their waist. And it's this big, oversized triangle shaped thing, and it covers their shape.
Yeah.
I call it the boob blocker because they're really hypo, like you can't show your shape. I was told by an Amish guy in a neighboring community when I first started driving, in all seriousness, and my typical clothes are like jeans and a t-shirt, right? But it's fairly form fitting. Okay. But he's like, because the way you're dressed, if you get raped, it's your fault. Like that's their mentality. He told me that to my face.
That's scary. But I can see it though. Like I definitely can see it because like the thing you said about like the girl with her brothers, it's like they don't understand the rules of sexuality because they don't talk about it. So for them, that's a reality. Like, oh, because you look sexy, you're asking for it. You know what I mean? And it's not
That's
even like you're looking sexy, but to them, because you're not dressed that way, you're looking sexy, right?
right. The female body is very tempting, and it's the female's fault if something happens to the female. They tempted the male. That's why the Amish women are taught to wear these clothes. And it's just so that was the first time that I learned that they don't talk about sexual things, is when that lady, Martha, leaned over to me and whispered to me that she was pregnant. Because in my world, I was like, yay, I'm pregnant. Let's, learn about this and talk
Mm-hmm.
about it, right? But they can't do that in their world. Anyway, so this one man, I'll make up a name for him. Okay, Elmer. So he had seen a bunch of pornography on his driver's phones, and then he had become very interested in it. So he actually got himself a smartphone. The Amish do have ways to get themselves smartphones. And he got himself a smartphone, and then he would sneak away, probably the barn or wherever, or bring it out when he was away with the other guys doing his construction stuff, and he would watch this pornography. And it became a problem, and the bishop became aware of it. And his wife, I remember, I had to drive her husband Elmer somewhere, and I picked up his wife and their sweet little children, and I drove her to her parents' house to stay while her husband Elmer would be away at this counseling, because it became such a problem, and I could tell that she was very, very, very disturbed by it. I mean, it was really causing a problem in their marriage.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't think that that would be a problem in Amish world, right? And if they don't get a hold of a phone, like I have a friend who was raised Amish, and she was telling me that in her community, and she is not Amish anymore, but the men would like sometimes get into their English neighbors' trash, and they would find magazines. I didn't know they still had those, but
I
they
know,
still,
actually, I didn't, yeah, I never thought about it because the internet's been around too much now, right? But the
yeah,
old Playboys and stuff.
I guess, and maybe new ones. I don't know. That's not my world, but they would the men would go and they would dig through their neighbor's trash, and they would find these magazines, and they would hide them away, and they would look at them when they were feeling the need to look at them. So,
Well, they're
you,
very similar. Like, I understand some of it because the religious aspect is so similar to Jehovah Witness, and my neighbor was born like 2 days after me, right? So we grew up together. She was Jehovah Witness. So like as you're talking, I'm thinking like they're so closely related with their views, except for the way that they live. Like Jehovah's Witnesses are allowed to have TV and stuff, but they're not allowed to celebrate their birthdays or anything. They're not allowed to be flashy. They can't dress like in a certain way either. And they have a lot of rules around all those kinds of things too with marriage and sexuality and like, you can get excommunicated the same way. That's why my friend had to stay married because if she left him, she would get kicked out of the Jehovah Witness religion, right? So had to stay. And that's I know they're the same way, right? So it's very similar, just different way of life, everyday life, but religiously they're so similar. And so I can kind of understand what you're saying. And I didn't think about that even in her world. Like, just thinking about like the fact that he like said, "Oh, well, you're like the rape thing." Like, it, yeah, like it's just because they don't talk about it and they don't know about it because they're so sheltered from those things that that's why they happen, I think.
I agree with you, and I appreciate that information about Jehovah's Witnesses. I wasn't aware of those belief systems, and I was raised Mormon, and I'm still a
Yeah.
practicing Mormon. I'm just a little bit, I'm fringe, right? I question a lot. I don't obey all the rules, right?
Yeah.
I like to obey God and how I feel God would teach us instead of the church. You know, there's always man's rules and power struggles in a church organization, right? With the Amish, any religion you have. But
Yeah.
Mormons were taught very strict things about sexuality and a very strict moral code and dress code as well. We sound like we're
Mhm.
kind of the three of us religions are kind of in the same group, right?
Yeah.
And it
They're
sounds like it
similar, it's just
does.
the Amish live in a certain way, but the religious aspect is so similar with Mormonism and Jehovah Witness and Amish pretty much, I think. They're all very, very similar in their views on things like that. And views on well, I don't know if Mormonism if you're allowed to celebrate your birthday or
Oh yeah.
Christmas or any holidays.
Yeah.
You are? Because yeah, in the
Oh yeah.
Jehovah Witness community, they're not allowed to celebrate anything because it's, I guess in their way, blasphemous to Jehovah, and so they don't celebrate anything. It's different. I don't understand it, but yeah, so like my friend going to school, if it was Halloween or something, she would have not attend. Her parents ended up taking her out of school and homeschooling her because the teachers weren't following their rules. She wasn't allowed to sing "Oh Canada," and she would have to sit outside of the classroom while "Oh Canada" was going on and stuff. So eventually her parents removed her because their views were so um were getting conflicted with what was going on at school. And then her parents started limiting how much she could play with me. Like she could only play with me once or twice a week because I was undoing the teachings of their church because of the way my religion was. And so, I mean, I got her in a little bit of trouble by doing silly kid things like riding a wagon down a hill, but, you know, her parents seen that as like, a bad influence, so she was only allowed to play with me once in a while, and they ended up moving to a Jehovah Witness community so that were they have those. It's pretty much it's almost like Amish in that way where they have Jehovah Witness communities where it's just Jehovah Witnesses so that nobody penetrates their belief system. And I know that the Amish are the same. And I think the Mormons are a little bit less like that, but like I think they're a little bit more open. But the Jehovah Witnesses are strict. Like it is pretty much like the Amish, except for the way they live. And well, even
Right.
with TV, like they're not allowed to watch certain things on TV, clearly, obviously, either, right? So it's very controlled. But yeah, it's very similar to the Amish. But I mean, I don't know what goes on behind closed doors because my friend doesn't really talk about it. Like she talked about her husband and the abuse. So I could only imagine what else was going on there, and what else goes on in other homes with those, like with the Jehovah Witness communities, right? I feel like it's kind of the same as with the Amish, like except for, like, obviously, they know when somebody's pregnant, but, I mean, in the way they except for adultery is the one deal breaker, like, that's the only way you can get out of a marriage, so they try to control the sexuality by doing it that way, do you know what I mean? Like, if adultery is committed, then it's a big deal and you're excommunicated and all that kinda stuff, right? That's
Yeah,
how they control it, I think.
control is the key word. And I appreciate that. I didn't realize they had so much in common. Yes, the Amish have their own schools, they have their own communities. They like to they like to control who people interact with, right? Who their friends can be, where they go. My little girl, from the time she was 3 years old, she traveled with me with the Amish all over the country because I homeschool. And so she's been all over the country with me, staying in Amish homes in several states, playing with the little Amish children. And some mothers would pull their children away from my 3-year-old daughter, right? Because what kind of influence could she have
And
on
it's
their
not a
kids? I'm
good
like,
feeling as a
what?
child because you don't understand why people are like, "Why can't you play with me?" And, like, being 3, like, "Aw."
Yeah, or my daughter's little English toys, but anyway, so back to the counseling. So this man, Elmer, went away from his wife to counseling, and I I have never had treatment for an addiction, so I'm not entirely sure how it works in our world. But I know in Amish land, the Amish put a great emphasis on healing through God and on healing through scripture and song, and they believe that God is the ultimate healer, so they will 99% of the time they will stay away from medications. They will not go to our facilities. Something the Amish have that a lot of people don't know about is they have their own treatment facilities. So I brought this man to a treatment facility, Christian based. Usually it's run by Mennonites or Amish most of the time because they have the same belief systems and they can pull from their scriptures and they can make sure that they're only saying and sharing things that apply to their belief system that would not be corrupting them, if that makes sense. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Well, cause yeah,
Okay.
it's just from my experience with my friend with the Jehovah Witness friend. It was very much like that. And coming from Western world, our recovery is very similar. You are supposed to find a higher power that is supposed to bring you to sobriety, right? And you look up to your higher power when you feel like you're struggling, and there's agnostic, but mostly it is religion based as well. Like we read a book called The Big Book, and it is basically like the sobriety Bible. So it's very, very similar to what you're saying they do, right? So it's not
Yeah,
far off actually.
that's really interesting because I was talking to an ex-Amish friend of mine, Fanny, and she like I said, she was raised in a very low order community and they had a lot of sexual additions even. I mean, I guess you can edit it, but bestiality was a big problem, okay? Like it's a
I know
big
I don't I
problem
put a
in the
disclaimer,
Amish.
so you can say whatever you want because
Okay, I
like
can say
yeah,
that.
I put a
Okay,
disclaimer.
so she knows a lot of people in her community growing up that liked their cows, okay? And I asked her, I said, "So what did they do?" And she said that the lower order Amish are absolutely not equipped to handle such addictions or situations. So what they do is they will have the person confess in front of church, like say Samuel is addicted to cows, right? Because they have this scripture that is from the Bible, and I can't remember the exact way it is stated right now, but it says that you confess before your congregation and then they support you, and that's biblical. So in the Amish world, they confess. I'm Samuel. Okay, I like cows. Okay, they confess in front of their congregation, the adults only, baptized members only. Okay, not in front of the children. And then they're put in the ban, which means they're shunned for like 2 weeks to 6 weeks. And during that time, they can't interact with people in their community. They can't, like, he can't sleep with his wife or sit at the same table as anybody or take anything from anybody's hand in the community or pay for any services from the other Amish community members. And that is supposed to draw them closer to God, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how they handle it. They really don't have the tools. I was asking her, I said, so do they give like alternatives? Because I went through a program with my son who had a pornography struggle and addiction. And, it was like the 12-step program, but it was the Mormon version. And so they were given
Yeah.
tools, right? And people to contact. And Amish are not, at least in her community, none of that is going on. It's all, okay, rely on God, read the scriptures, you're in the ban, figure it out.
And then having to confess that in front of all those people would be like something that would make me never ever do it again. So I mean, I bet you it works because it's it's something that's embarrassing, right? So you don't want to have to admit it. But that is the same as with us and our community, is that we have to do the 12 steps where we have to admit to all of the things that we have done wrong. And then we have to tell somebody. And then we have to apologize to the people that we have done bad things to. So those are how the steps kind of work, right? And it's very similar because you do have to tell somebody and then you have to apologize to the people that you've hurt, so you also have to go back and do that, right? So it's kind of it's similar, but it's we like I said, they do AA itself is religious. I go to a religious program called Celebrate Recovery. So
Mm-hmm.
it is religious and religion based. So it is the prayer. We start the meeting with the Lord's Prayer, and this then we do the serenity prayer, and then we do the Lord's Prayer again at the end of the meeting. So of prayer. And in the big book, there is a lot of stuff to do with the Lord and stuff like that, but it's not actual scriptures. You know what I mean? And it's quite similar, but it's not as, I guess, like people are friendly and they support you, not like it's not like you're being punished. Do you know what I mean? Where I feel like it sounds like they're more being punished opposed to being supported and helped, like you said, through the journey of getting better. You know what I mean? Not just saying you have to read this and that's how you get better. You have people that help guide you and cheer you on and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's like a community, right? In itself.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. So they are told to go and apologize as well. But in Amish land, in lower order Amish land, it seems like a lot of that is just kind of shoved under the rug and they don't want to deal with it. In the community that I live in and that I have driven the most for, they are more supportive. So this goes for criminals and this goes for people that are addicts. They're very, very, very well organized as a religion. They have a bishop, they have a deacon, and then they have like 2 or 3 ministers to each church group. Okay, and
Yeah.
the community that I live in has 4 church groups. Anyway, so what they will do is if somebody is struggling with an addiction or criminal behavior, they will assign a group of like 3 men to them. And then what those men will do is they will help them hold accountable and they can go to the men if they need any support. And they are mentoring them, but they are not trained like you and I would go to people that are trained, even if they're not, they don't have a degree maybe, but they at least have some kind of formal training. These Amish men who support people going through addictions and criminal situations they're not given any formal training, maybe a workshop or two, like with an Amish organization, but that's the extent of it. So it's really mostly scripture, God, and I'm here if you need me to talk, but no formal training, which I think is a problem. because some of those
Yeah,
things
because
need
I
a
go and
little
see an
deeper.
addictions doctor. Like she's like a licensed medical doctor that specializes in addictions, and she is my like kind of like my therapist. So I go and I see her, and that's a lot of where I get my guidance and like help and stuff from because she's formally trained in what to do and how to help. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if the people aren't trained in any way, they're just going off of what they think's best, right? It's not the same. So I always think that when people that haven't experienced it themselves or aren't really actually educated on it, they aren't very good at helping because they can't relate to you. And if they can't relate to you, you're not going to really listen and take in what they're trying to say. You're just going to kind of feel like a block. You know, like there's a block between you and them because they can't reach you, I guess.
I agree.
From
And
my
yeah,
experience with it.
yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah,
But yeah.
that's the case. And they also use a lot of so like scriptures, isolation, and they use a lot of herbs and tinctures. And in the Amish community, they have people that like one of my neighbors, she makes her own tinctures, right? She has her own apothecary. Another neighbor does some chiropractic work. They specialize in things, but they're not formally trained, and those are the places that they go, if that makes sense. So, and they do a lot of detoxing though. Okay,
Yeah,
one
well that's kind of
addiction.
like also the program.
Oh, good. Okay. But one addiction that I think it's addiction, at least I've seen several Amish that are hypochondriac. And then there's this one woman in a community. She's super skinny already. Like you and I are thin, but she's a lot thinner than us, really thin. But she is always, always, always doing coffee enemas. And it seems like almost an addiction. But that's how they try to
I feel
manage
like you can
things.
well, I feel like you can become addicted to almost anything in life. It's just a way of escaping your traumas or your everyday life that you don't know how to cope with, right? So I think that like it can be almost anything. Like I like feel like everybody goes right to goes right to drugs and right to alcohol, right? But in reality, there's you can I could become addicted I actually probably have a TV addiction, to be honest. I love watching TV. So
Okay.
that right there is an addiction because it's my way of shutting my brain off and not having to think about whatever it is that's bothering me, right?
Right. It's an escape. Yeah. And so
So
the Amish are
yeah.
human too, and they need to have their escapes, and their lives can get very stressful. Can you imagine running a farm, running a business, having all these social pressures to behave this certain way? And then, having 10 kids on top of that. And I mean, it's just a lot and no electricity, and they live the hard way on purpose. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. So I'm not going to blame them,
Mhm.
right, for needing to have coping mechanisms for sure.
Like I myself, just probably because I wasn't brought up that way, would find it very, very overwhelming to live that way. And I would definitely be finding ways to cope myself because it is like even just having I only have 2 kids and they're young and I find it sometimes overwhelming, and I mean, because my husband works a lot, I'm with them a lot by myself. So and I also am a full-time student, and I have a business, plus I do this, so I do become very overwhelmed, but living that kind of life where you're constantly working all the time and even with cooking even, right? And then having all the kids on top of that and making your own clothes and everything, like, it's a lot. Like, I could only imagine that most of them probably feel burnt out, like, every day.
It is overwhelming, and yes, they are very human. One thing that I do love about the Amish, though, is that they do have the community support. and they don't have all those distractions that you and I have, and they can just focus on, okay, these are my responsibilities. And maybe the community support is their saving grace, because I've felt alone. I don't know if you have, but I think most of us have. And they always have people to go to. They always have people that are checking up on them. They have community events. There's just a lot of support and love within those communities. And I think that would make a big difference.
Well, I know like there's actually a in psychology, I just cannot get this lighting, I'm sorry. In psychology, there's this thing, it's if you feel more a part of a community, mental health wise, you feel better about yourself and more confident, less likely to do something negative because you feel a part of something, right? And if you don't feel a part of something and you feel like you're not like alienated or just not a part of your community, you that's when you're more likely to do negative things, right? Like whatever it might be that's negative to you, but, yeah, it's the theory, it's a Carl Jung theory about, being a part of a community is makes you more likely to be happier, have better mental health, and less likely to get into trouble per se, right?
I agree. And I have a few ex Amish friends, right? They've left the culture. And when you leave your community, right, and you decide to become English like us, then they completely shun you. They completely cut you off. No more family, no more friends, no more support. You are not welcome back there unless you come back into the full culture and religion. So, one of the things that they miss the most, besides the food, which is incredible, but they miss the community because they completely, when they leave the Amish, they leave their community and they have to go out into the world, a very different place, and find another community. And it's hard. And there's no community like the Amish community that I've ever seen. They are extraordinary.
Well, even with me, like we've outgrown our house, but my neighbors in my neighborhood is everybody's very connected, everybody's very close with each other, and I love that. So I should move because we've outgrown the house, but I don't want to leave because I, for the first time in my life, felt a part of a community. So I know how they feel in that regard because I love that my neighbor will come over and help me do my gardening. I love that one neighbor will come down and walk with me to the bus stop. Another one like comes over and like we all stand outside and talk and like I don't know, everybody's just very close with everybody. So if you walk down the street, it'll take you an hour because you'll stop and talk to everyone on the street to get to the store. So it's very nice. Like I've never experienced that before. Normally neighborhoods aren't like that. That's kind of something from the 50s, but it's really nice. And even though we've really outgrown our house, I don't want to sell it because I like the neighborhood so much compared to where I lived before my whole life. Like I grew up in the same house my whole life, and my neighbors were never like the neighbors I have now, right? So it's a catch 22 sort of.
That is hard. Yeah, that's a gift. It sounds like you live in Mayberry, right?
I know it's crazy. I swear it's like I don't know. It's funny too because even in the mornings, like I said, even people who don't have children come out to the bus stop and stand with the rest of us moms and like conversate, say hi to our kids. My own neighbor brings my children little treats and little toys all the time because she doesn't have kids. And yeah, like I said, after the bus leaves, we stand there and talk for like I don't know, sometimes hours. It depends on how many people are there, right? And it's just, and we all, it's bad because we all know each other's business, but it's still really nice and feel really safe. And I like feel very included and liked for the first time. And I love that feeling. So that is something I've always been kind of jealous of the Amish for is
Hmm.
the fact that they have that sense of community because I always lacked it, right? So I always been curious about becoming Amish because I do like the modesty of clothing, and I do like the fact of their community, and I do like the idea of living for yourself, and like I do like a lot of their ways and traditions and morals and stuff. But I do see what you're saying is that everybody's human and they aren't as perfect or as, like they make mistakes too. And I romanticize so much, cause I see it. And when I see them in their horse and buggy, I'm like, oh, I kind of wish I lived that way myself. But they are human and we all make mistakes, right?
Yep, that's the lesson. What was it? There's a quote, don't judge somebody for their choices when you don't understand their reasons. I think about that a lot because raised Mormon, I was very judgmental, and the Amish, they're very judgmental. I've met very, very, very judgmental Amish too, but we can't judge because we just don't understand where people are coming from, and maybe we would behave that way too in that situation.
Well, I've learned that through like doing work with addictions and stuff like that because you can't judge people when you go into the rooms and it's anonymous and all that kind of stuff. And people will tell some pretty like big things that if you were to be judgmental, would be like, I don't want you to come near me. You know what I mean? But it's learning that, not to judge because we are human and I have myself made my own mistakes. So would I want to be judged for my mistakes? No. So I'm going to give them the same respect that I give myself, I suppose, right?
It would be nice if people
But
did that. Yeah.
before I let you go, do you have anything else that you want to say any last little goodies?
So I was on one podcast and the guy, what was he saying? I can't remember. He was teasing me, but I hoard Amish proverbs, just Amish little phrases of wisdom. So if I can share a couple of those
I'd love it. I love
on an
those things too.
uplifting note. So there's one, and it's about empathy, just like what you were saying. And the Amish, they say it this way. They say, before putting someone else in their place, put yourself in their place. And that's exactly what you try to do. And then one more, and this is one that really resonates with me because I have been in very dark places. And I think we all go into really dark places, but this is the proverb, where there is life, there is hope.
I love that.
So yeah,
Those
I
were both beautiful.
yeah, so those are the things I want to leave. Just where there's life, there's hope. That is the most important thing, I think, to remember.
I love that. And Haley does have a novel. I'm going to post it in the notes for everybody so that you guys can take a look if you're interested. And thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your perspective and your opening our eyes to a different culture that we don't normally get to see or understand because I definitely really learned a lot about the way they live, but I didn't think they you know what I mean? I'm not saying this right. I'm doing word soup right now. I learned a lot about the real way they live compared to what I thought from just seeing as an outsider. Hearing it from an inside view, it I learned a lot about they are human, and just some of their ways are interesting. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that it definitely opened my eyes to some definitely interesting things about the Amish culture for sure. So thank you so much.
Yeah, this was fun.
Well, thank you, and I hope you have a really good day.